What's up, everybody? Thanks as always for supporting the show. It would mean a lot to me if you would take a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel, and then follow me on social media on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter so you guys don't miss any of our content over the course of this season. All right, let's talk some basketball. In this, obviously disappointing start to this series, I think it's also been deeply informative. It's been confirming of some of the things that we've thought throughout the season. But I want to kind of start with the Nuggets a little bit, because in the Lakers' pursuit of trying to address these issues, whether it's them trying to reconfigure around LeBron and AD this offseason to try to make another run at it, or if it's a pivot, I think a great team for them to try to emulate is the Denver Nuggets, a team that I think is not just the defending champion, but I think the legitimate favorite this year for a reason, and a team that I believe has a real chance to go on an extended dynastic run here. And so what has this series taught you about the difference between a real championship team like the Nuggets and the Lakers?
Well, to me, it's been the killer instinct of the Denver Nuggets. Before the game, I asked Nuggets head coach Michael Malone, you've beaten this team 10 straight times. Like, how do you battle the complacency with your group just not thinking we're going to show up and beat this team? Because we've done it 10 times in a row. And at some point, human nature starts to kick in with a certain level of complacency, even in a playoff setting. And he essentially said, as a coach, that is what I have to battle. And the message has been, we were down 12 in game one. We were down 20 in game two. We're now on the road. We're facing a hostile crowd. And, the Lakers want to beat us after losing 10 straight times. So the message is, don't get off to a slow start. Don't turn the ball over and keep the crowd out of the game. And the Nuggets did none of those things to start that game. The Lakers got off to an 8-0 run. The crowd was as loud as I've heard it all season. It was a deafening pitch, and it was the start that the Lakers needed if they were going to win a game against the Nuggets. And lo and behold, in my opinion, Denver had their worst half of the series in that first half of game three, turning the ball over, missing open threes, and really just struggling on both ends, yet they were only down 4. Then they opened the second half with a 24-10 run. And to me, this team has just won the mental game against the Lakers. They have gotten stronger in second halves. They've outscored the Lakers by 31 points through the 3 third quarters in this series, plus 42 overall in the second half. So we've seen it. The Lakers have thrown their best punch early, and they've gotten out to these double-digit leads. They've led at halftime in all 3 games. They've led at halftime in 7 of the 11 consecutive losses to Denver. And then Denver just takes over in the second half. It's the same movie on repeat, but for Denver to have that level of just killer instinct and seriousness and professionalism and lack of complacency to do the same thing over and over again, and regardless of LeBron's getting downhill in transition, AD's cooking them with 14 consecutive made shots in game 2. Like, they don't care. They run their offense the same way. Everybody is locked in. They play team basketball on both ends, and you don't see guys complaining. You don't see guys pointing fingers. You don't see guys going at the refs, and they just play a serious brand of basketball. It reminds me in a lot of ways of the San Antonio Spurs and the way that they built that dynasty of didn't matter who's doing what. Obviously, you had Tim Duncan as the head of the snake. In this case, it's Nikola Jokic. You had Tony Parker, and Jamal Murray is the analog there. But just the level of no matter what's happening, they're never rattled. And that's why you see them close a game 2 making 7 consecutive shots against the Lakers. Like, they are one of the best crunch time teams I've ever seen, period. I think we could talk about where they rank all time, and I think they're higher than I think most people would assume at this point. But to me, the crunch time, the focus, and just the mental advantage that they've had on the Lakers through these 11 straight wins, that to me has been what has stood out the most.
Yeah, that specific piece about that first half and that being one of the worst halves they've played, I agree as it pertains to their ceiling, but their floor is still so high. And that first half was really a great example in the sense that, no matter what, whether or not MPJ's hitting the threes he normally hits, or if Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic and their kind of decision making is as sharp or as sloppy as it can get from time to time. Like Aaron Gordon is still 6'10", freaky athletic, and working underneath the basket. And so like, even though like even if you look within that first half, like the Lakers were sharp in a lot of areas in that first half, but a specific area where they were weak is LeBron James on the back line was just doing a really poor job of reading that, like there is a read and react with that low man position, in the sense that like you do have help responsibilities, but you also have Aaron Gordon responsibilities, and you kind of have to toe that line between the two. And for the record, in the first 2 games, I thought LeBron was really good in that role. But I don't know if it was just, I don't know if LeBron lost faith after the collapse in game 2. I don't know if it was just literally just a bad night, but literally from the opening tip, he just wasn't as sharp in that specific area. And so like, it's like the Lakers had all these areas kind of tied up in that first half, but that one opening, Aaron Gordon just smashed through and dominated the first half of that game, right? Like there was like Jamal Murray, even though he was relatively inefficient throughout the series, he just had these little stretches in each series where he was really good. I thought his shot making was really good in the third quarter of game 1, obviously down the stretch in crunch time of game 2. I thought in the early second quarter of game 3, he just hit a bunch of timely shots, right? And like one of the things with Denver is their floor is so high that like even if you manage to kind of outplay them for stretches, as soon as you dip, and if they just start to gain ground, right? And then honestly, I thought Denver threw a really good punch in that early third quarter stretch, and then you could just literally see the Lakers let go of the rope. And that's where I want to get to the part you talked about with being serious and being professional, because that to me was the biggest thing that stood out to me about this particular matchup. The stuff about floor versus ceiling, that to me is more of a total first round kind of like takeaway. In general, I think we're learning that like players with higher floors are more valuable in the postseason than players with higher ceilings. KCP doesn't have the ceiling that D'Lo has, but night in, night out in the playoffs, he's just a more impactful player. His floor is higher, right? But as we go to the seriousness, when it comes to the Nuggets, they're one of the most important parts about a championship team, in my opinion, is like the discipline and focus on a possession by possession basis by each player within what their job is and what they're expected to do. Aaron Gordon after the game talked about this. Like, I'm just doing what my team needs to win. He dominated that game, not by dominating offensive possessions, not by being this devastating on-ball defensive threat that was just putting his offensive player in jail. No, his job within the scheme is to kind of like clean up stuff on the back line offensively and clean up stuff on the back line defensively. And like he just capitalized on what was happening within that game, and he kind of broke through that opening like we talked about, right? He did his job. And within that context, he was the hero of that particular game. But he wasn't trying to be the hero. He's just doing his job. Every single one of these guys has a job. Even Michael Porter Jr., as gifted as he is offensively, like one of the most important roles he has on this team is he's a dominant rebounder. And that's what they got 49 points and 25 rebounds out of Michael Porter Jr. and Aaron Gordon last night. That's completely insane. And when you look over at the Lakers side of it, it's like there's always these random possessions where a random player will just kind of bite off more than he can chew offensively and take an overly difficult shot. There is like 10, 15 possession stretches where they're really laser focused on all the details. And then there's 10, 15 possession sequences where they're not. It's not a consistent part of their basketball character. And when you talk about professionalism and serious basketball, to me, it's about that possession by possession, do your job every single time. If you see them make a mistake or go off script, it's usually like they'll do it once and then Mike Malone will lose his mind and yell at them. And then they're right back on track by the next possession. And like, that just was not, it ironically, and this is the last thing I'll say about it, it ironically reminded me of just the entire Laker regular season, which was like, if you caught them on the right night and you watched them, you're like, this team has championship potential. Look at how serious these guys are. Look at how focused they are. This is what they're capable of. But then 2 nights later against Brooklyn, they would just be terrible. Like they were never a team that could hold on to the rope consistently like a real championship team for the entirety of the season. You know what I mean? And so within these games, if you watched a 10-minute sequence, you'd be like, man, the Lakers are right there with Denver. But then eventually they'd let go of the rope and Denver's serious approach would take over. And I think it was really, really informative, not just about what the Nuggets are and what makes them so great, but also just like team building and coaching and different aspects like that I think that are preventing the Lakers from getting where they need to go. On that note, kind of moving towards the role players, obviously that was the biggest gap in this series. I pulled the numbers last night. I'll pull them up again here in just a second, but it was a complete and total outclassing by the guys down the roster. As a matter of fact, non-LeBron AD Lakers had 131 points and 56 rebounds through 3 games. Non-Murray Jokic Nuggets had 180 points and 83 rebounds. So what did you learn specifically about the Laker role players in this series, and where do you think they fell short compared to the championship baseline?
First, to me, the Lakers are just too small. And that was a concern for me entering the season. And I think that has played out specifically in this matchup. If you look at the starting lineups and compare them head to head at each nominal position, the Nuggets have the size and physicality advantage at all 5 spots. Nikola Jokic is bigger and stronger than Anthony Davis. Aaron Gordon is bigger and slightly stronger than LeBron James. I think they're pretty similar, but he's slightly bigger.
Aaron's about an inch taller. Yeah.
Yeah, he's about an inch taller. And like, I mean, in terms of who's won the paint battle, battling for rebounds and stuff, like Aaron Gordon has dominated that. So Michael Porter Jr. is not as strong as Rui Hachimura, but he's taller than him and he has dominated the rebounding battle. You just mentioned it last night. MPJ had 10 rebounds. Rui Hachimura had 2, and MPJ did play more minutes, but it was about a 10-minute difference. So it wasn't like enough of a difference to warrant the 8 rebound gap there. Austin Reeves and KCP are similar sizes, but KCP plays with more verve and physicality and just more athleticism. And then D'Angelo Russell versus Jamal Murray. I think that one I don't even have to go into, but Jamal, similar sizes again, but Jamal plays with a certain level of toughness and physicality. So like that's before even getting to the bench, and like Peyton Watson, Christian Brown, these guys are coming in, hounding ball handlers, getting offensive rebounds, blocking shots, finishing in transition. So like I thought the Lakers got dominated from, I mean, we talked about the mental side, and clearly Denver has them in a psychological chokehold there. But on the physical side, like Denver is just bigger, they're stronger, they're more athletic, and they use their physicality in a better way. Like I think something that hasn't been talked about enough is Denver's won the free throw battle in 2 of these 3 games. And like that's supposed to be one of the few strengths the Lakers had over Denver, was they get to the free throw line way more than them. They don't foul as much, obviously. So like the Lakers, and I know you've touched on the free throw differential before, but like that is an advantage for the Lakers, based on how they play offensively and how they don't foul. Yeah, Denver's won the free throw battle in 2 of the 3 games. They've won the points in the paint battle in 2 of the 3 games. So Denver has beaten the Lakers. Like they've played their style of basketball, but they've also beaten the Lakers at their own game. And when the Lakers have played smaller front lines or like-size front lines, they dominate them and they kick their ass and they look great. When they play a team that's bigger than them, it's been the opposite. And I think for me, the fact that the Jackson Hayes was a DNP CD in game 3 just shows like the Lakers never really addressed the backup center spot. Jackson had some nice moments over the last couple months of the season. Christian Wood, to me, like never really panned out and shot 31% on threes. Had some good moments as like a rebounder and defensively. I think about like Kevin Durant against the Suns, but like that was the beginning of the season. And I think Christian Wood overall was a bit of a disappointment. So the fact that the Lakers never really added another big man that was defensive minded, a clear plus rebounder, a guy who could just innings eat for 8 to 15 minutes and spell AD and defend Jokic and give him a few hard fouls, similar to what Dwight Howard did in the 2020 series. Like that to me, what was a weakness of this roster. And the fact that Rui Hachimura in an elimination game is playing 28 minutes and you're going small with Taurean Prince at the 4, or you're going with these 3-guard lineups and you're giving up all these offensive rebounds. And again, just getting physically dominated. Like part of that's on the coaching staff and the way that they're deploying these guys, but part of that is a roster construction issue. So to me, biggest takeaway overall was just too small, but also I think just not good enough. And if we're ranking the starting lineups in terms of the best players in the series, like 5 through 7, 5 through 8 might be all of the rest of the Nuggets starting lineup. And the fact that they arguably have the two best players in the series, depending on, especially in crunch time, obviously with Jamal, but like they have the best player. Jamal has outplayed LeBron and AD for stretches. And then you have Aaron Gordon, KCP, and MPJ all thoroughly outplaying Austin, D'Lo, and Rui. Like that just can't happen. And I even think the bench outplayed LA's bench. Like I think Christian Brown and Peyton Watson have been more impactful than anyone off the Lakers bench, just with, again, their defense, their rebounding, their energy, and their finishing and transition. So like from top to bottom, and then the coaching, the adjustments, like Denver has decisively won this. I think it's even been more of a gap than the scoreboard indicates. So I just think Denver is bigger and they're better.
No, I agree. The piece about the role players off the bench, actually, like Christian Brown and Peyton Watson, kind of brings me back to that seriousness and professionalism piece. Like those two guys just come in and it's like, all we need you to do is be athletic wrecking balls within the context of these specific responsibilities on the floor. Those dudes come in and they buy in and they do it. And so once again, those guys have a certain floor. Like you can expect Christian Brown and Peyton Watson to have a certain amount of impact just with their athleticism. Whereas it's like, okay, Spencer Dinwiddie checked in. It's like, maybe these threes will go in, and it's and we'll see what happens, right? I also the bit about Jackson Hayes, like in the moment last night, I'm sitting there thinking like this to me was one of the fundamental issues with Darvin Ham during the entire Darvin Ham experience. And we're going to talk about Darvin in a bigger context later, but he just always defaulted more towards offensive skill and speed and not towards size and athleticism. And I thought last night when the chips were down, him being like no Jackson, just a lot more 3-guard lineups was a pretty strong indicator of like Darvin's kind of basketball philosophy, which I think is flawed. And then also like that within this particular matchup, that was a death wish. And one of the problems too is, the Lakers just, their guards weren't playing well. So like you're leaning into guard play when your guards are getting their ass kicked. It didn't make any sense to me in the moment, but you mentioned size. I agree. I think it's a little deeper than size, and I would just call it like overall physicality in the sense that it's not just height. It's even at these specific positions, these guys play with more force. Like you mentioned KCP versus Austin Reeves. Like Austin, and we're going to talk about Austin. Like I thought Austin and Rui were trying to do their jobs. I just thought they didn't play well. Like Austin and Rui both just had nightmare series. I saw that clip of Austin hugging Phil Handy, and it looked like he said, "It's my fault." And like you could just tell he was heartbroken. And I felt bad for Austin because like Austin really defended Jamal Murray well for the first 7 quarters of this series. And I thought he did his job. He just couldn't make shots. And Rui, I thought, was given a really difficult role too, to guard Jokic to start the series. And you could tell that kind of sapped him of his confidence, and then he was just never able to regather it. But like other than those guys, it was a lot of unserious basketball. But above and beyond that, it was the lack of physical force that they could bring to the table. KCP brings physical force. Aaron Gordon brings physical force. MPJ with his length brings physical force to the table. Christian Brown brings physical force. Peyton Watson brings physical force. Austin doesn't. That's not in his toolkit. D'Lo doesn't. That's not in his toolkit. Rui does, but they stuck him consistently in matchups in this series where he couldn't, because they were basically using him to eat up minutes, right, on Jokic for about half the series to this point. But like Spencer Dinwiddie is probably the best athlete of the role players, and he's not a very good athlete, right? Gabe Vincent has a certain force that he brings, but he's just small, And so like that to me was the big thing that stood out. It just is like down the roster, there's just not enough physical force. And when you go back and you look at the 2020 Lakers, that was a huge element of what made them great. Alex Caruso, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Dwight Howard, Kyle Kuzma. That was a huge part of what made them great. Even Danny Green. He was just a big, strong 2-guard, right? And, honestly, it was funny when I look back at kind of the last few years, even if you just erase one singular mistake, like there was a lot of panic trades and stupid stuff that happened over the last couple of years. But if they had just held on to Caruso If they had just held on to Caruso, which, by the way, wouldn't have cost you any asset or anything, it would have just cost money out of Jeannie Buss's pocket. A lot of money because of the luxury tax, but money. And money that probably she would have recouped through the success of the team, in my opinion. So if they just had Caruso and you're looking at Austin Alex as your backcourt instead of Austin D'Lo, fundamentally changes the athletic profile of the team, slots everybody into easier roles defensively. Now, instead of Austin have to chase around to Jamal Murray, it's Alex Caruso chasing around Jamal Murray. And instead of D'Lo and him be, space cadet trying to chase around KCP, it's it's Austin Reeves, who's a very focused defender who would be guarding KCP, and then everything makes so much more sense. And so there's a lot to dig into with the eulogy here. But like that piece about physical force off the ball, especially when within the context of the physicality of the postseason, shines through.